Ever step out of a moving car at about 30 miles an hour? I did. I didn't mean to. And it didn't end well. Tell you what, how about in the next 25 minutes or so, let's do an Alla Prima oil painting on this canvas right here. It's already wet and slick and ready to go. And I'll tell you about it. So let's paint and I'll tell you the story. It happened, well, first of all, let me tell you what I'm going to do here. I'm going to paint a mountain scene because they're quick and easy and I like mountains. Here's the story. In 1979, the winter of 1979, late fall, early winter 1979, I got a job working for one of the companies that was building power line across the central United States, across the plains mostly. There was an urgency back then to close the grid. Let's see. I'm going to have mountains come up pretty high, and I'm going to have, I want a little phthalo blue in here. I'm going to have some water down here. Probably, let's see. Yeah, probably something like that, I guess. Yeah. Let me blend all this. Well, anyway, we were closing the grid. There were many big companies doing that work. Like I said, there was a real urgency to close the grid across the United States, stop those blackouts and brownouts that were occurring mostly in New York City. And they wanted to connect all of the power grids around the country so that they could put an end to that. Well, we were working light to light. I have some clouds here, just some high thin clouds, I think. We were working what's called light to light. I don't want to use that brush, I want to use that brush. Which meant that when it was light enough to work, you were on the job. And you worked until it got too dark to work. Let's see, come on. So, days were long, nights were short. And let's see, I better have some go all the way up to the top. It wasn't so bad in the winter, because you know, nights are long and days are short in the winter. Let's see, yeah, I guess I'll use a blender brush and kind of work that in a little bit. So it's not so bad in the winter because nights are long, days are short. That'll work. Let's get a mountain going. Now, my wife and I, at the time, I was working for the company. We were building power line in Nebraska. My wife and I were living in Ogallala in kind of a kitchenette type thing with our 4 small children. And let me see. I'm not sure how I want this mountain to be back here. Anyway, well, we're living in a kind of a kitchenette type thing with our 4 small children, and I was driving to a little town called from Ogallala to a little town called Lodgepole, which is only about 15, 20 minutes away. And it was fine. But over that winter and into that spring, we completed the section line and went to Sydney. And so we completed the section that went to Sydney and started working on, that was the western end of the line. We started working on the eastern end of the line, which went to the substation in Sutherland, Sutherland, Nebraska. So they moved the show up from Lodgepole, which was only about a 15, 20-minute drive from me, and they moved it to a little town called Mayfield, which was almost an hour the other way, to the east. So, and as we're getting into spring, of course, the days are longer, nights getting shorter. That meant the nights got really short because I was driving an hour there, hour back, Had to be there at daylight to work until it got too dark to work. So I was getting home, showering, and having supper in bed, getting up 5 hours later and going to work. It was tough. Now, there was a friend of mine who also lived in Ogallala. A lot of the guys who didn't have families, you know, they a lot of them stayed together, so they just up and moved closer, and find an old trailer house or whatever they could. And all right, let's see. I think my son will be over there. But Jerry and I, we both had families, and so we were making that long commute every day. So what we decided to do was we decided to share the driving. He would drive one week, I'd drive the next, he'd drive the next, and I'd drive the next one after that. And that's what we decided to do. That way, one of us at least, we had an extra hour sleep in the morning, extra hour sleep coming home at night. And worked pretty good. That's some black that I don't want on there. Okay. I want that to be a little brighter right there. Okay. So that's what we did. And he'd drive one week and I'd drive the next. I think those trees, the hills are going to be mostly covered with trees down there anyway. Let me get some shadow on this backside. Well, we were both driving old rigs. His was a kind of an old pickup. I was driving a 60s era Dodge with a standard transmission, 3 on the column, first, second, third, and reverse on the column. And it was a sturdy old car. The engine was sturdy, but problem is, or was, that the linkage in the transmission was getting bad. And every so often, it either wouldn't go into third gear, or once it was in third gear, after a while it'd slip out. And it made it really tough. What I had to do, the linkage was getting really wobbly. So what I had to do was, a lot of times I would just put it in second gear to get away from Ogallala and out. Ogallala sets in the valley of the Platte River. Nebraska's not as flat as you think. It's kind of a lot of rolling hills. So I'd leave the valley in second gear, and as soon as I got up on top, I'd get on a rolling hill. I'd stop the car, shut it off, get out, get underneath, and physically put the linkage into third gear. Then I'd start it while I was going down that hill, and hopefully by the time I got to the bottom of the hill, it would start. I'd have enough speed up that I could just go, and then I would just keep in third gear all the way to work. There's only one problem. I had a 90-degree bend about halfway through my commute, but luckily there was a railroad siding, lots of these big grain silos, and a big gravel parking lot. So, and that early in the morning, no traffic. So I'd make sure no one's coming. I'd just slow down as much as I could, swing around, and pick up the road again, go on to work, coming back, just do the reverse of that. Okay. But anyway, so I told you about having to put my car physically in gear. Well, one Monday morning, Jerry called me and asked me if I could drive that day, because he said his car had to go to the shop and he wasn't going to be able to drive that day. And I said, yeah, sure, I can drive, Jerry. So even though it was his turn, he said he would pay me back the following week. And I said, yeah, that's fine, that's fine. All right, let's get some trees growing. These hills here. So here I am driving on my 8th day. I mean, we're working long hours, no time off, really, to speak of. Well, so I'm driving, heading down the road, had my Carhartts on, luckily. And Jerry's over there snoozing away. And oh boy, if you ever been in a car when you're sleepy and someone else is snoozing, you know how tough that can be. He's over there snoozing away, and man, I'm struggling. I'm struggling to stay awake. Well, we were headed south, hadn't got far from Ogallala, and the car slipped out of third gear. So I thought, okay, here we go. So I coasted to the top of the next hill, and pulled to a stop, shut the car off, got out. Man, the minute I got out, the world went crazy. I was hurting in every extremity. Thought somebody's beating me with a hammer in every extremity I had. Knees, elbows, hips, head, feet. I was getting pounded. I couldn't figure out what was going on. Well, as it turns out, the car hadn't slipped out of third gear. I'm gonna have a little bit of snow on these mountains. Just a bit of snow. Just a little bit of snow here. Maybe down in this hollow here. Up here in the peak. Maybe down here. Just a little bit of snow. Get a little bit of blue. Mix a little shadow color here. Well, anyway, I finally came to rest. Something hit me really hard in the face. And I was in pain everywhere. Okay, I'm gonna have some foothills in the foreground here next to this lake here. So let's see. Let's use this one. Yeah. Didn't know what had happened. I knew I was not in the car anymore. I was on the ground somewhere. My head was hurting really bad, right above my eyes. I was hurting everywhere else. Luckily, I was wearing my Carhartt overalls, or it had caused really a lot more troubles than it did. Well, I opened my eyes and I couldn't see, just very blurry. Then I realized something warm was in them. I know what it was. I wiped it. It was my own blood. I finally got to where I could see, and I was in the borrow pit on the side of the road, and the car was nowhere in sight. I realized then what had happened. Well, I didn't realize right then. It took me a few minutes to wake up and realize that what had happened was I had dreamed that the car had slipped out of gear. And let me see. I need this way back here. Yeah, I'm going to have some foothills back there. So apparently what had happened was I had dreamed that the car slipped out of gear, and it hadn't really slipped out of gear. So I had gotten out of a car that was moving at a pretty good clip down the old road. And of course, you step out of a car and it's going 35 miles an hour. So it's going to flip you. And it did flip me, 50, 60 feet before I ended up in the borrow pit. Hit a barbed wire fence with my forehead, which is where all of that came from. Where all the blood came from. And so I cleaned my blood out of my eyes, kind of got oriented. It was still dark, of course, well before dawn. I could see the glow from Ogallala to the north. And so I didn't know where the car was, but I finally got myself oriented and realized, well, I figured out north from south and figured out that Ogallala was to the north. And so now I'm going to put some trees over here. Let's use this right here. And put some trees in here because this is going to be a little closer, so you're going to kind of be able to see the trees a little bit. So that's way too green, isn't it? Yeah. So I got myself oriented and started heading south. I have to use this, I guess. Yeah. I climbed up this, I stumbled and hobbled. Got to the top of a low hill, and I could see where the car was. The car had swerved off the road and sunk itself to the axles in a farmer's field. They were plowing and just planting at that time. The car had stopped, of course. My door had closed. Jerry was standing about 20, 30 feet from the car holding his lunch bag, looking around. And I knew that I just knew that the theme song to Twilight Zone was playing in his head, because he had no clue where I was. He sure wasn't where he expected to be. He expected to be at a show-up yard with lots of men, equipment, machinery. And he was in the middle of a farmer field, and I was gone. Poor guy. Anyway, I started hobbling through the field toward him, and he finally turned and saw me, and his reaction was, he said, "What's going on, Fred?" He called me Fred. I have no idea why. He said, "What's going on, Fred?" And I said, "Well, I stepped out of the car." And he said, "Why on earth would you do that?" A legitimate question. Took me a few minutes, and I finally explained to him what had happened. And it took him a few minutes to understand what I was talking about, and telling him, what had happened to me. He said, "Well, what are we going to do now?" And I said, for one thing, I said, we probably ought to head back. As I said, the car's not going anywhere. We probably ought to head back down the road to Ogallala. And he said, "Yeah, I reckon so." So I'm going to have a hill in the foreground here. Let's see. Kind of like this, I think. Going down over toward that lake. Let's see. Yeah, like that. So he finally understood what had happened. Tried not to laugh. So we headed back up the road toward Ogallala. And luckily, as the day brightened, people started getting up from their businesses and getting ready to go into the farm. And a couple of farmers' daughters who were headed to work in town, they pulled over and gave us a ride into town, dropped me off at my house, and dropped Jerry off at his. After Jerry got his rig out of the, let's see, I need some, gonna have to have a water line. So after Jerry got his rig out of the shop, he took me back out to where the car was, and we found the house was nearest that we thought it belonged to, and sure enough it did. Found the farmer out in his barn lot there, and asked him if we could help him. He said, "Is that you boys? Is that your car out there?" And I said, "Yeah, it is." Told him what had happened. He had a good laugh at my expense, but he was a good guy. He said, "Let's go get you sorted then." So he took his tractor down there and pulled my car out of there. And Jerry drove to work the next day, and that afternoon I went to the store, got a bolt and a nut, cut it to fit, so it wouldn't stick out too far and mess up the other linkage. And I replaced the wobbly pin and put that bolt in there so the linkage would work. And then the car worked after that really well. I wrecked that car about a year later. I'll tell you about that sometime too. But anyway, that's how I stepped out of a moving car. Okay, let's get some let's get some black in here. And let's get some trees that are going down over the slope here. Just a few here. But anyway, that's how I stepped out of a moving car. Like I said, I didn't mean to do it. And I was sore for a long time. Luckily, I didn't really break much, except this wrist. Found out a few years later that I had a bone that had broken and repaired. That week I thought it was just sprained, so went ahead and worked and dealt with it. And taped it up. And I went ahead and worked because I needed the money and they needed me to work. So let's see, just one little one right there. And let's just have some brush around too. Let's see, what do we do with that? Let's use this brush right here. Let's put some brush around on this hillside. Kind of variegate it a little bit so it looks like a real hillside. You know what? Let's have some big trees over here. Yeah, let's have some big trees that are a little closer. And let's have that one go up. This one to go about there. One in the corner. And a smaller one right about here. Yeah. I'll never forget Jerry standing in that farmer's field, holding his lunch bag, looking around like, where in the world am I? Like I said, I'm pretty sure he was hearing the theme song to Twilight Zone playing in his head. He never forgot that. He told that story often. And I'll never forget what he asked me. He said, what's going on? I said, well, I stepped out of the car. And he said, what in the world would you do that for? Well, I didn't. I really didn't mean to. It wasn't on purpose. Well. Let's have some different kind of trees here. What do you say? Let's have maybe some poplar type trees here. You get here. Yeah, poplar type trees. I need a white trunk, don't I? Or more or less. Yeah, here. Get that off. Gonna need a white trunk. Yeah. But just have a few trunks, just an indication of it. And then let's see. Let's use this and put some bright green on them. Let's see, maybe a little brighter green. Yeah. That works better. A little brighter. Okay. And we'll put some dark brush at the bottom. Something like this. And then let's have a rock over here. Okay, we got a couple more minutes here. Let's have some rocks. Yeah, maybe like that. Maybe this one comes down here like this. That'll be good enough. And let's see. Put some gray on them, make them look like rocks. And lighter gray on top. That's good enough. Now we'll put some brush around them. Kind of set them apart. Some brush in this corner here. Set those. Yeah, let's have some dark brush. Yeah, some real dark brush. So it looks like we got time. Let's have a few flowers. Let's see. What am I going to use for that? Not that. Yeah. I think I'll use this right here. We'll have, let's see. Let's have some kind of pinkish red flowers around just for a little color. What do you say? Maybe there's a whole bunch of them here. Have a little darker red in there too. Variegate that color a little bit. Ah, you know what? I need one more tree and then I'm done. But I need a tree. Can't be in the center, can it? But it could be kind of off to one side, right in the lake, right here. Just need another tree kind of standing out here. Let's see, he needs to be a little wider at the bottom. Let's give him a friend. Let's give him a partner. Somebody keep him company out there. Middle of the field. And let's variegate this brush a little bit. I don't really like that. Let's go this way. It's like there's some other kind of brush there. I didn't really like the way that looked. Okay, let me sign it. We'll be done here. And take my advice. Don't go stepping out. I don't like that at all. Take my advice. Don't go stepping out of any cars. Especially at speed. Even at 35 miles an hour, I can attest that it's a tough gig. Okay. You sign this real quick, and we'll be done. Getting old and my hand shakes. I guess that looks like a DTH. Okay, more or less. And this is 21. Okay. Well, folks, thank you for watching. I appreciate your time. Get rid of those things. Thank you for watching, folks. I appreciate your time. Thanks for spending this time with me. Hope you enjoyed the story. Don't go stepping out of any cars. Till I see you next time, God bless, and you take care, okay?